These drugs are heavily abused. Like, it's not like, well, in Thailand you can, like, where places where blood work is cheap and they're more free and open with, constantly getting health checkups. But here or other countries, you're not checking your thyroid all the time. Like, it's expensive to get it checked. You basically are just rolling the dice when you add in T4 and T2. What's up, everyone? It's Russo. I hope everyone is doing well. Today's ASMR sip of some Perrier Forever Lime. Welcome back to PEDucation. I cannot believe I didn't do this one, but we're going to lump all the thyroid hormones together. I definitely want to see people in the comment section write out their own experiences, because the thyroid is so different between each individual in my mind. Some people have what's called, I'll have Andrew throw it up, hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism naturally occurring. And the primary indicator of the thyroid is TSH. Thyroid stimulating hormone. My sources is going to be obviously Cheat or GPT, but this is in the Anabolics 11th edition. Check it out on Amazon. I definitely think you should give this book a shot. I definitely wanted to continue featuring the book until Cheat or GPT, takes over as PEDucation moves on. All right, we'll go through the histories of the thyroid hormones. So the key histories between these thyroid hormones will be featured first out of the Anabolics 11th edition. The first medication that included T3 was technically a thyroid extract, first given to a patient with myxedema, a skin disorder associated with hypothyroidism, in 1891. Natural thyroid extracts contain therapeutically viable levels of thyroid hormones T3 and T4 and were widely used in medical practice for more than 60 years. Going into T4, it hit the market by 1955. So they are going down and just basically creating the hormones that the thyroid produces. There's T1, T2, T3, and T4. T1, there's not much known on. It's kind of like skip over that one. T3 is the most mild one in my mind, the one that I would personally play around with and do play around with, because the muscle loss isn't there as much. T4 is where I would, sit it with a female, honestly. I would not put a female on T3, but that's just me. And essentially, T3 is like, I'm going to basically flatline, go past the thyroid, which is the mechanism of controller of the entire body's metabolic rate, and I'm going to override it. And that's where you see all the craziness go on in bodybuilding, normally around T3. So these were all around 1955. So as these medications go on, more and more people start trying to get in on the bag, and you see the data going all over the place to defend normally the original developers, because it's a very, very difficult thing to get the first drug to market. So these ones were always seen by everyone, because even dumbass Russo over here knows that if you want to lose fat, messing with the thyroid would probably be the way to go. So in the 1980s, it's known that throughout history, these drugs are going to be very popular, and they are going to go into the underground eventually. T3, T4 were really, really popular, all of enhanced bodybuilding. T2 kind of hit the scene later in my mind. So that's a brief history, and hopefully one of the editors wrap that up better than I did. I'm basically going to go directly into the cascade tree, so I'll have Andrew throw up the hormones around T3. I will say that with T3, it's one of those ones that I see people jumping into way too quickly. They'll essentially go straight to T3, which is crazy. With these drugs being so popular, they are never going to go away. However, I think most people can get the job done with T4. I think T3 should remain for the extreme performance IFBB pro bodybuilders, that their job is to prep for a show, and they may need to do multiple shows a year, and maybe they have to quickly get in shape. T3 is going to be in that category. Meaning, I don't want to see like, you know, the mom, like she's now a PD guru and she's like, I'm just going to get T3 and like skip to the most powerful one. Where in my mind, I only do T2. T1 doesn't really seem to have an effect as far as people around the world, you know, using it. But T2 works perfectly fine for me. What are the side effects once you start messing with your thyroid? Because the minute you start messing with your thyroid, your body's going to know what's going on. Right? Your TSH level is the primary controller. So when you are adding in T2 or T4, that is inactive thyroid hormone that your thyroid can activate. So you're still relying on the master controller. So you still have this feedback loop that is making it sort of somewhat safe, right? Sort of somewhat safe. It's really not, but the T3, it's like, all right, shut the thyroid off. I'm this, you know, ginormous 280 pound, all muscle bodybuilder with shredded glutes in my ass. Like, if I need to come in harder, and that is the thing I am going for with this show. If the judges are like, you know, you've came in this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, and this way, how about we see a harder and drier look? And this is going into your next show, and you're actually that guy, the open pro, then maybe the guru could override the thyroid and potentially burn some muscle off and get the job done. I think for the general pop, you should be looking into T2 or T4, knowing Russo picks T2, and I get crazy overheated, I get crazy sweats, and out of the Anabolics 11th edition, side effects are generally associated with overdosage. These drugs are heavily abused. Like, it's not like, well, in Thailand you can, like, where places where blood work is cheap and they're more free and open with, you know, constantly getting health checkups. But here or other countries, you're not checking your thyroid all the time. Like, it's expensive to get it checked. You basically are just rolling the dice when you add in T4 and T2. You don't even really know where it's sitting at. And with T3, you're just like, all right, just shut it off, right? You're just like, you're going to accept that you're completely fucking up the thyroid. But I'm saying, like, you don't know where it's sitting when you start dosing it, and you don't know what the growth hormone pathway stuff you're messing around with is impacting that. And you also don't know the overall systemic androgen receptor load impacting the thyroid either. So if you don't know these variables already to a point where it's like, yes, the data, the blood work is showing, nobody's doing that, including me, unless you're in Thailand where blood work is super cheap. Nobody's doing that. So you're kind of rolling the dice on how to even dose this. So I do agree with the book. Like, it's way just like jumping the deep end with T3. No. And this is what gives this such a bad rap. Headache, irritability, nervousness, sweating, irregular heartbeat, increased bowel motility, menstrual irregularities. Overdosage may induce shock, may aggravate or trigger angina or congestive heart failure. Chronic overexposure will produce symptoms normally associated with hyperthyroidism or the overproduction of natural thyroid hormones in the body. The occurrence of overexposure linked side effects is normally caused to immediately reduce or discontinue therapy with it. Acute massive overdose may be life-threatening. So there is a life-threatening risk that, Andrew, Zach, if you're like Togi and you get some liquid T3 and, you know, you just label it like carrot juice or something, like, you could just like be on that hospital bed pick. You know, T3 is really something that, well, I see it more with Clen too. It's like, I would prefer caps, like capsules, because the liquids, you know, Andrew, it seems like when person dose liquid, person has to do math. These are drugs that you really don't want to fuck around with and overdose, because I've probably triggered hyperthyroidism multiple times doing all this shit. And I always stayed away from T3. I never wanted to fully flatline my thyroid. And I thought, you know, like I said earlier in the video, that if I was an open pro and I had this guru monitoring everything, like T3, okay. But like T4 even messed me up. Like T4, I'd be completely choked walking around. I definitely noticed a lot of muscle loss as far as T4. And it was one of those ones where I was like, you know, I don't really want to mess with this, you know, like, unless I'm competing or unless I have to look like this on a certain date. Russo's the bloat lord. Like, I don't really see playing around with it, why this would be such a fat burner. Then when I got to T2, I'm like, okay, T2 seems very tolerable. I get a noticeable effect, and I can always ramp my cardio against it. And personally, I'm someone who likes to do cardio, so it really was no big deal. But again, everyone's looking for the quick fixes and performance enhancing drug biohacking. You're always looking for the quick fixes. And T3 and T4, especially T3, looks like this glaring quick fix, and you can throw everything off. You can throw absolutely everything off. And it's something that you'll end up coming to someone like me or the other coaches available online, and you'll be like, my thyroid don't work now. My gear's bunk. No, your thyroid's fucked up. No, my gear's bunk. Like, you have to be pulling bloods if you are, doing a thyroid hormone. Most people don't, especially all the broccoli hairs. They're probably not pulling thyroid hormone panels and shit. I would just err on the side of caution as far as like where T3 is sitting. T3 is sitting up there with the big players. T2 is what Russo is using as the bloat lord in the gym as a slight metabolic increaser. T4 is like that middle ground that I feel like everyone's like, all right, T4, you're still letting the thyroid somewhat control the body, which it was designed to do. You're not ever like, oh, I don't need the thyroid. Like, everyone needs a functioning thyroid unless you're an open pro already self-admittedly abusing drugs at that level at a professional physique body. That can only be maintained by the guru and you, obviously, and you need to constantly be monitoring everything anyways. Why not be at a high performance level if you're competing at the upper echelon of the sport? Most people aren't. Most people should not be messing around with T3 in my mind. Let's go into administration for the Anabolics 11th edition. 100 to 125 mcgs per day for 154 adult. The full therapeutic dose may be given from the onset of therapy in otherwise healthy adult patients. Note that due to the long half-life, the peak therapeutic effect at a given dose may not be achieved for 4 to 6 weeks. So around 100 to 150 micrograms are stating in the underground and will rarely exceed 250 micrograms. I'm asking Cheater GPT, Andrew, and it says, disclaimer, the following information is for educational purposes only. Thyroid hormones are powerful and can cause severe side effects. So Cheater GPT is pulling 12.5 micrograms a day to 100 micrograms a day. So that's the dosage. T2 is pulling 100 to 1000 micrograms a day. And then T4, apparently, Cheater GPT is pulling 50 to 400 micrograms a day. This is Cheater GPT, not me. I will say that I have T2 tablets over in my garage, and I do 1 or 2, and that's perfect. So I am not even messing around with T4 or T3. I have messed around with T4 in the past, and sometimes I do have a little T4 over there that I will break open a cap and I will dump like a little bit under my tongue personally. But that's what I'm using. I really enjoy that. But with these prep cycles, a coach will most likely be ramping it aggressively. As far as the hormones, according to Cheater GPT, the thyroid gland produces several hormones that regulate metabolism, energy production, and overall physiological function. Among these, T3 and T4 are the most significant in terms of metabolic impact. The least studied and the least understood of the thyroid hormones is T1. T2 is less active than T3 and T4. Wow, that seems wrong by Cheater GPT. It should be saying T4. Some research suggests that it can boost fat oxidation without causing muscle loss. It's all dosage depending. It's all dosage depending. It's really one of those things where you are truly messing around with your own personal thyroid and you are seeing exactly how your thyroid reacts. You are seeing how you are fully managing the thyroid each show, I would hope, right? If you're just using it for overall fat loss, I would definitely go against it. And I would go into the T2 category because I really notice it. It's one of those things where I really notice it. I notice the fact that basically I can pop 2 T2 for a couple days, and if I'm ramping my cardio against it as far as high intensity cardio, and Russo's actually putting the fork down for once, then it works perfectly fine. I think if you're actually trying to do an aggressive show, an aggressive cut, then you should be thinking about T4. I already told you what I thought about open bodybuilding in T3 and how it should stay in there. I will tell a story that Dr. Tony Huge told me. And overall, I essentially heard that he had a bikini competitor come to him from a other coach, and she did this whole prep. And for those who want to know about bikini preps, it's crazy. Bikini preps, first off, you're dealing with a bikini competitor. That's like point blank. Then you're like, how much cardio is this individual going to do? This individual is going to post these on social media to be evaluated by all her friends. They spend a lot of money around being at this show. they spend a lot of time promoting themselves. This is a journey of them achieving their, in quotation marks, best look. We see coaches get crazy with bikini competitors to a point where I don't know if I'll ever coach. I definitely pay consulting back up, maybe way later, but I have all the respect to bodybuilding and gurus and coaches, but I just enjoy being creative, intrinsic in imagination and managing clients' stress, like holding that. I would take that very personal. But with bikini competitors, especially if you're trying to place them higher and higher, it becomes a very high level skill cap game where people are just born with different thyroid metabolisms. People react to these drugs all sorts of different ways. And Andrew and Zach, like, the coach is doing so many clients. He's like, well, that worked for all my other bikini competitors. And when you're looking at like 50 pictures of butts a day, you're like, it becomes an attention to detail thing. And when the attention to detail thing drops off, what do? You start like, we'll add in T3 now. We'll completely shut the thyroid off. Tony was talking with this individual and she basically blew up 40 to 60 pounds after immediately. So all this hard work, a ton of cardio, eating nothing, basically starving herself. This is putting a tremendous impact on her mind. This is going to be showcased to a crowd. This is going to be at her social media all the time, being critiqued by other competitors, stalked by other competitors, all this image disorder around these bikini preps. Because if anyone's dieted at all, it changes your mind. That's why it's so important, in my opinion, to have a coach. It's so important. Her thyroid crashed. With women, it seems really difficult to restart the thyroid, and there's a lot more issues around the thyroid with women than men. A man could probably do T3, get off it, and eventually, as long as he kept training and didn't eat potato chips all day, if he kept bodybuilding, eventually it would probably work itself out as long as there's enough systemic androgen receptor load on the body each day for the CNS to turn the thyroid stimulating hormone back up. The best way to look at what your thyroid is doing is TSH. And I will look at TSH all the time. I will look at TSH every single blood panel because everything is dependent on the thyroid. That's why I'm like, why would you want to be in the situation where Tony's like having to comfort her of your body is going to come back. You're going to get this weight off. This is not permanent. Thank you for coming to me. You didn't just sulk it off and then live in that quote unquote new body after you did that prep. And then Andrew, they'll go online like, I ruined my body competing. I took this drug and then my body's ruined. Like, it's like one of those things, like she went and she saw another opinion. That's what you should be doing all the time. I'm just one of them on YouTube, right? There's a ton of them. There's older ones. There's more experienced ones. There's more intelligent ones. But there's a ton of us that stepped into the public to stop situations like that occurring. Tony gave her all the advice to get out of there, to get out of that situation. Because that's a lot. When you go visually from looking at yourself in the mirror, counting the muscle striations on your ass and shoulders, to blowing up after, looking like a whale as a woman, that's a lot on the mind. You have no idea what's going on. And you're not a biohacker in quotation marks like Russo. You're going to have to seek another opinion, which she successfully did. What if you didn't? That's why I think T3, unless you are going to manage a girl on T3 recovering the thyroid after, that you should not, mess with T3 with a girl. That's my mind. You shouldn't mess with T3 with a girl. That's just mine. I think T4, as far as it sits, is the universal pick alongside T2 being the safer pick. I noticed T2, it's perfectly fine for me. I sweat buckets in it. If I dose 1 to 2 tabs, I do not get nauseous. I do not get any of the symptoms of stupid I'll have Andrew throw it up again, hyperthyroidism. It's not like, it's just burning fat. It's causing something called hyperthyroidism. The other thing I wanted to mention is muscle loss. So with muscle loss, the whole point of a show is to not cause muscle loss, to preserve it, to continuously preserve the hardness, the density, the fullness, the roundness, the look of the muscle as you cut down. Why would you want to redline your thyroid? This should be a crutch position drug, or like I said earlier in the video, it should be one of those things where like the top of the top gurus obviously can mess around with T3. If you're going to mess around with T4, the next blood panel, you should be checking TSH. You should see where the thyroid is sitting after that TSH left the body. After that T4 left the body where the TSH is at. I do not check when I dose T2 for a couple days in a row. And personally, if you're one of those guys that are like, oh, I have to get in shape for, this date. If you played around with T2 and actually got after fat loss, meaning you weren't using this as a crutch drug to just, drop body fat while eating like shit. Like if you're like, okay, I'm going to lock everything and dial everything. I'm going to add in T2. You could probably get the beach look you want to achieve within a couple weeks, like 2 to 4 weeks of messing around with T4 and T2. I would stay away from T3. T3 is one of those things where it's like, why would you want to risk that situation Tony had to deal with by shutting off the thyroid? That's a woman. Her vanity is an attachment to her from birth. So if you're messing with that with the thyroid hormone, you better be there to recover it if something like that goes down. In this bodybuilding guru game where I have, in theory, 20, 30 girls, Andrew, at the same time, like, and they all want to win, and I want them to win. I'm high performance. I want them to place. It becomes nauseating. I give those bikini girl prep coaches my hat off because I would never do that. Even if I was a good coach, I would stay away from doing bikini girls because of the mind games, how the judging goes. The judging is, it's hard for me to sit there and try to judge. I am not good enough to pick out the winner. I will try, but I am not good enough. And when you're having these females who are constantly nailing these stage weights, or you're having these females, Zach, that are being coaxed into competing at the gym. Oh, you'll do great to get the next client, to load them up on drugs, to get them addicted to the coach, to constantly have the drug supply to maintain the look. This is where it's like T3, T4, T2 need to be known on this sort of issue revolving that in the female world. With the male world, I think you should use a different fat burner. There's tons of natural fat burners out there. And if you're a male, you should be ramping the androgen pathway and you should be ramping the growth hormone pathway by monitoring your blood sugar and eating a caloric deficit. You're good. I want to see a change in the way bikini is operated and that these girls are looked after. Nailing it on the show day, Zach, and looking like, you got the death face, but your butt, it's perfectly dialed on the leanness, right? The aftermath of what they do is they'll post pics of them binging. And as someone who has aspirations to compete, I would tell you that after I competed, I would eat so strategically to not balloon up and to ramp out of there and to slowly repair what I have accepted that I damaged my metabolism. If I'm using drugs, I would rely on my coach so badly, and I would probably ramp a bulk blast right after because that's when I could grow the most. With girls, they eat cookies after. They post it all over Instagram. Nerd Russo is just scrolling like, oh boy, I hope they're going to balance that carb influx because that's a big glycogen load influx. And if they're regulating their thyroid by using T3, aka shutting it off, and then they're just going to cold turkey everything, you have these individual women who build up all this self-confidence doing this prep. They're in a hyper-competitive mindset. Dipping more into their masculine. They're pushing. They're having a coach constantly tweak how they view themselves. They're then being subjectively judged in front of a crowd for subjective vanity. You then have judges that are giving them critiques to improve them over time. Very, very bad situation if they use these sort of drugs that permanently set the thyroid out of whack, and then they either binge eat after, because I will probably eventually cave. Russo's the bloat lord. I just know in my head that I really can't because the metabolic damage is so severe after. It's so severe after if you blow up and balloon up. You see all the bodybuilders like the before, like the show day, and then the after, and they're a water buffalo, and all the dudes are like, like we all went and got burgers after, and it's easy to fix. With the females, they got the crumble cookies, Andrew, and they're down in 10 of them, and I'm thinking of the carb calculator as their thyroid is shut off, and you're like, oh boy. And then 2 days later, they achieve the worst physique of their life, and unlike men, that's very hard to undo. That's very stressful. And the mind impact. last week I looked like that. They're looking at their picture, Zach, on Instagram. I look like this. They're looking in the mirror right now, completely blown up, crash thyroid. The coach is like, that was a great show. If you want to do another one, that'll be 2,000 down. Your suit's 700, but like that's how it's going right now in bodybuilding. The thyroid hormones are always going to be here. Big Pharma spent a lot of time developing them. And I think you just need to err with the side of caution that thyroid is the master controller of the metabolism. That thyroid is the master controller of the metabolism. So you're going to see the master controller get thrown off, whether you're using any of these. Then if you're going to be like, all right, I'm going to just use T3, you just fucking get the strongest one, right? Then you're going to see, oh, wow, the thyroid is going to suppress down. It's the same way that, oh, if I inject a bunch of tests, my body's like, why the fuck is there a bunch of tests? Let's up sex hormone binding globulin to bind up all the free tests. And Russo's like, well, fuck you, body. I'm gonna inject SARMs, which SHBG doesn't even recognize. Then like your body is trying to adapt and auto-regulate, and it's looking at all the feedback loops. The thyroid one is the worst with women. I'm not a big proponent of Clen at all, but Clen preserves muscle. These thyroid hormones on paper theoretically could cause muscle loss, which if you're competing or trying to look like something on a certain date, and you're not like, you know, an open pro that's rotating shows and has the guru and spends, you know, 100K on the, like Andrew, they're online, like I spent 150K on my cycle this year. You know, they're just like going nuts. If you're a normal individual, I think T2 is perfect. If you're okay, you know, I need something a bit stronger, everything's dialed, and I personally want to mess with the thyroid, then go T4. If you are a bikini competitor, I would go T2 or probably lean towards Clen. That's just me. I wouldn't really mess with T4, or I would know the risk factor of messing with T4, and I would know that these drugs are going to cause muscle loss. These drugs are going to essentially impact the look of your muscle no matter what's impossible for me to know unless you come to me with multiple cycle setups, multiple picture setups to see how these drugs individually impact you. Know that if you're going past T4, the thyroid controller, which is the master controller, you are bypassing that. You are bypassing that. You must accept that, and you must bypass that and accept that, oh man, your TSH is going to flatline, and then you're going to obviously most likely experience a hyperthyroid state. And okay, maybe an open pro bodybuilder, he's just very comfortable at being in a hyperthyroid state all the time, and it doesn't matter. Most people will not enjoy being in a hyperthyroid state. Like Andrew, like when I would wake up, you know, because I was just dosing all these sort of androgens all the time, like I'd wake up in a puddle of sweat. Like my thyroid's like, we're not resting, we're cranking, like, you know, my thyroid's cranking the whole time, right? You don't want to be doing that. You don't want to be doing that. You want to be thinking like, okay, is my diet in check? Check that. Okay, have I tried natural fat burners? Maybe went the injectable L-carnitine route. Check that. I will add in yohimbine, rolashine. Check that. See how that goes. If you want these drugs, know that there are extreme risks with these thyroid hormones, because I've seen it time and time again where people just love stacking the thyroid, and really what they're doing is causing muscle loss. That's a first thought that pops in my mind. Is like, okay, well, you're not a competitor. You don't have a lot of muscle in my mind. I don't have a lot of muscle in my mind. And you are doing T3. Okay. So then you're going to cause muscle loss while you're hyperstimulating your androgen system, and you are using the growth hormone system. So for what I see is that you shouldn't even be messing with T3. What's actually known out and about in the metaverse world is that this is commonly used. These drugs are commonly used. They will not go away. They've been here forever. And if you can take anything from this video, is that I would roll with T2, T4 super powerful. And then I would think like T3 is that one that sits on the shelf for the extremely serious people, the people that have access to constantly get blood work pulled for cheap, and the people that you see constantly competing. When are we going to say like these thyroid hormones are extremely powerful and we should be comparing them to other thyroid hormones? If you have any more information that you would like to place onto this PEDucation, I appreciate in the collective, or if you have any corrections, please elaborate and expand onto the correction and what you would change moving into the next PEDucation episode. I will see you guys in my next video.